If you pass a broken down car on the highway, do not stop. I've been a trucker for years, long enough to hear every tall tale there is about seeing something crazy on the road. Every trucker has one, and you tire of hearing them pretty damn fast. You're hunched in a grease-stained diner, just trying to choke down a diesel-tasting coffee before slinking back onto the highway. But some grizzled long-haul vet on the next stool over is talking your ear off about the time he saw a UFO or picked up a hitchhiker he couldn't see in his rear view. It's exhausting. The voices change, the faces blur together, but the stories stay the same. Only now, it's my mug spitting out an outlandish tale to anyone who'll listen, and I don't like it, because I'm not spinning some crazed yarn in hopes of spooking the fresh-faced truckers. I'm giving them a cold, plain warning, because these things, they're out there, and they might be coming to you. It was one of those nights so dark you'd forget there was ever any light in the world. No stars, just black, rolling clouds smothering the sky. My headlights were an island of light in the infinite black. The white lines on the road rippled past in a hypnotic flow. I'd driven this stretch of road before, and dreaded every minute of it. There was nothing but long grass on either side, rolling outwards in endless tufts. No landmarks, nothing interesting. Just the kind of mindless, featureless terrain that has you tasting the solitude. About the only noteworthy thing was that out there, something spooky happens to anything electrical. The old guys call it dropout. Your radio dies down to a numbing crackle. Your headlights shrink into narrow little bands. I heard explanations ranging from some weird mineral in the ground to an alien spaceship sapping away your voltage from up above. But all that mattered was it was real. It was annoying. Because of the dropout, I barely saw the pickup. My headlights were so dim they barely caught in the glass. Was that a windshield? I hit my exhaust brake and snapped on my high beams as the rig rumbled to a halt. In what little light they could manage, I saw the white body of a pickup truck slumped on the shoulder, driver's door hanging open. I rolled in behind it, tires churning up gravel, and killed the engine. Hopping out, I craned my neck in all directions. Nobody. The truck was roadside repair setup. It had a winch in the back and a brushed steel side bin brimmed with tools, chains, and cables. There was a cartoon detail slapped on the door. Tony's Roadside Repairs. Cute, but where was Tony? I placed a hand on the hood. Cold. Hadn't run for hours. Leaning into the cab, I saw the keys dangling from the ignition, turned a quarter. The radio spewed out a steady stream of quiet, meandering static. Maybe he went to take a leak. Hello? Nothing. All I could see around me was grass tumbling in the wind, rolling outwards in waves before giving way to darkness. I've got a job to do, I told myself, as I climbed back in and peeled onto the road, my hands pinching the wheel in a vice grip. This haul won't drive itself in, I thought, as the white lines started whipping by and guilt brewed up in my stomach. I drove a short distance before reaching the tunnel. It was old school, a jagged mouth punched through the mountain with dynamite God knows how many decades ago. It yawned open, and once inside, the world shrank. The only light came from a handful of buzzing sodium lamps, caged in rusted wire, and bleeding sickly orange down the cut stone walls. Maybe 3 of them still worked. The rest were dead, leaving whole stretches of the tunnel buried in thick, impenetrable dark. I plowed into the darkness, feeling like I was driving a submarine, like there was no world out there, just me and the truck. Then, somewhere in the middle, something pierced the black. 2 amber lights blinking softly in and out. Hazard lights? Somebody broken down? That explained where Tony ended up. I tried my high beams again, but they flickered in and out before settling on a weak glow. Damn it. I pulled it over to the tunnel's side, my mirror almost touching the rock, and dug around for my flashlight. As I opened the door, the humid air draped around me like a blanket, cold but rich with some ungodly odor. Not quite rot, not quite mildew. It smelled almost like the ocean. Not surprisingly, my flashlight was on the blink, leaving me with a dull, flickering beam to fight the darkness. I cast it as far ahead as I could as I tried to make out the car. "Hello? Anybody there?" My voice bounced down the tunnel, meeting no response. But there was something shuffling around up ahead, a dark silhouette by the lights. The torch beam was too weak to make out any details, but there was something there all right. Someone. As I clattered onwards, the silhouette took on a shape. A man. He was waving, hinging his arm back and forth. There was something strange about the motion. It was slow, lethargic. Up, down, like a puppet. "You okay there?" As my voice reached him, he started shuffling like something was dragging him back. He stiffly collapsed into his driver's seat. I kept going, the hazard lights drawing me onwards. Blink, blink, blink. As the dull torchlight spilled along the car's silver body, I noticed it was odd. I know cars. I spend half my life staring at their taillights, cursing them under my breath. I can name makes and models by the shape alone. But this, it was nothing. Not a Toyota, a Kia, or a Chevy. Just car. The kind of thing a kid would draw come to life. The hazard lights pulsed intensely, rippling in a fit against the dark. I looked back at my thready headlights, shook the flashlight, and watched the beam cut in and out. How come this guy's not hurting for volts? I was close enough now to really look at the bodywork. It wasn't metal. The torchlight splattered beneath its surface, filtering red, unveiling a twisted network of fibers, veins, coursing through the panels. And the whole thing was moving, undulating gently in and out, beating. My feet froze to the ground. I panned the flashlight over the driver's side window. The body in the driver's seat was pale, paper white, clouded eyes bulging from their sockets, mouth hanging agape. On his shoulder, a round white patch was sewn onto the jumpsuit. Tony's roadside repairs. A dull, amber light began to leak from his open mouth. I should have ran. I was too late. Something long spewed from the body of the car, tearing and whipping through the damp air. I was yanked off the ground before I knew what was happening, an immense pressure crushing my ankles together, grinding bone against bone. It had me. I clawed at the tarmac as I was dragged back, losing fingernails but desperately trying to fight the pull. I kicked, I thrashed, I screamed. I twisted my body until the boots were wrenched clean off my feet. The tentacle flung them into the darkness and flailed in anger. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I didn't waste a second. I bolted away with a speed I didn't know I had, body electric with fear. I ripped open the door of my truck and threw it into reverse. Stomping the accelerator through the floor mat, I watched the dials spike into the red. The engine shuddered to the point of stalling, wanting to die right there. But I willed it to go on. Out there, the car was coming after me. Not driving, but walking, scuttling on a tangle of segmented legs sprouting from its undercarriage. The headlights pushed out of the body on stalks, pulsing with furious yellow light. I couldn't even watch it chase me. My eyes darted between my mirrors. I could barely make out the white flanks of my trailer, but I had to. I frantically steered and countersteered, keeping it in line. If I jackknifed in the tunnel, I was dead. But then my mirrors caught them. More lights. Amber. Flashing. Another figure chiseled out of the darkness, drunkenly waving its arm. This time I really saw it. He was little more than a skeleton. Long, desiccated hair plunged from a yellowed skull. The tatters of a denim jacket and what looked like bell-bottoms hung from the bones. I saw that the bones were lashed together by a network of little tentacles, their tips gently glowing, blinking in amber. From the neck, the tentacles braided together into a thick, glistening appendage, feeding back into the car. Anglerfish. Poor fella was the lure. This car was old. Big round headlights, wood panels, rear fins. It was from back when cars used to have edges. My trailer clipped its cadaverous lure as I shot past, shattering bone into puffs of powder. A shriek, wet and angry, rattled through the tunnel. It yanked its broken lure inside itself and spat out a crazed, thrashing tentacle. It seized my mirror, tearing it from the cab and tossing it into the void. But I was clear. I kept reversing, The truck was screaming at me. Warning lights I'd never seen before erupted on my dash in an expensive rainbow. The engine shuddered so hard I thought it would leap out of the hood. But I kept going until the rock of the tunnel peeled away and the black night sky rolled above my head. Then I stopped. The tunnel mouth yawned. Within its shadow, amber lights flickered. 10, 12, 15. I wasn't sure. How many of those things are in there? Needless to say, I skipped the tunnel. I backtracked until I had the weakest bar of signal and called the cops, then spent the rest of that night with my eyes glued to the windshield. My head dipped once or twice, but I wouldn't let myself sleep. The bright steel morning singed my eyes by the time the patrol car trundled in next to me. The cop tapping my window, lukewarm coffee in hand. They knew about Tony the mechanic. He was reported missing the previous night. They went in, scoured the tunnel with their spotlights, but found nothing. That didn't surprise me. They acted funny. Sure, they tried to look taken aback by my story, but every raised eyebrow was well practiced. Every, "Your mind plays tricks on you in the dark," and "You sure you weren't drinking?" rehearsed to a T. They know what's in that tunnel. Dealing with cases like me, like Tony, that's just Tuesday morning. So all I can do to help anyone is warn them. If you see a broken down car on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking away in the dark, you might feel like stopping, like being the good Samaritan, ever eager to help change a tire or lend out your jumper cables. But these creatures evolved to feed on that very kindness. And they're hungry, very hungry. Do not stop. I work at a 24-hour pet ER, and we had a patient that wasn't an animal. The man walked in at 2 a.m., dragging something black behind him. The way it moved didn't sit right. Neither did he. The receptionist felt it immediately. The way he walked, stiff and uneven, like a scarecrow with one leg shorter than the other. He hid greasy blonde hair beneath a 10-gallon hat, spurs clicking as he moved. I watched the security footage later. His lips were white and thin, his teeth crooked, his mouth twisted into a half smile, like he was seconds from laughter. He was dragging a massive black Rottweiler. The dog resisted, back paws sliding across the floor. The camera didn't pick up sound, but later, the two gals at reception told me what he said. "He's acting possessed." They handed him intake forms. He hobbled back to a bench, and I watched through the lens as another client, a woman holding a cat carrier, subtly slid a few seats away. I looked up his paperwork. The address led to some warehouse out in the scrublands, 3 states away. The name seemed fake too. Keaton. No records. No online presence. It didn't seem to fit him. But the dog's name? Mutt. That was the only detail I believed. You might wonder why I checked. It's not standard protocol. I don't usually do this. But the events of the last few nights led me to my search. When he handed the paperwork back, he sat down again, dragging the dog with him like a sack of flour. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes fixed ahead. He barely moved, like a corpse propped upright. His dog didn't move much either, just sat there, waiting. We see a lot of characters here, some genuinely kind folks too. But this man, something about him was wrong. I stepped into the lobby to bring him into an exam room. It took him a second to register me, like he was in a trance. And then the smell hit me, stale cigarettes, gas fumes, and beneath that, something worse. A rotten, greasy stench that clung to the air. The dog sat still, vacant, a husk. It was like someone had lobotomized it. As it stood there, drool began dripping from its mouth, pooling on the floor. I introduced myself and got to work. "So, what's going on with Mutt today?" Keaton didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to the ceiling, like he was watching something flutter above us. "Oh, he just ain't acting right. He ain't been eating much." This is usually where clients start rambling. Some could go on for hours if you let them, but he was done, still staring at the ceiling through those dirty locks of hair. When I knelt to take the dog's heart rate, the second my fingers touched its skin, a wrongness crawled into me. That tingle before lightning strikes, that creeping dread when something awful is about to happen. The vitals were normal, heart rate, breathing, but its skin was cold. 97 degrees lower than we like. I tented its skin, saw it was mildly dehydrated. But when I peeled back its loose lips to check its gums, I felt like I was too close to something I shouldn't be. The gums were pale, the pupils locked onto me, dilated. It wasn't growling, no hackles raised, just watching, like it was restraining itself. That feeling of unease was sickening. "Don't turn your back on him," the man said. I paused mid-turn. "Excuse me? If you're gonna walk from him, do it facing. Otherwise, something bad might happen." I exhaled sharply, irritated. He'd watched me get close to the dog, lean in, listen to it, yet now he decided to warn me it was aggressive. I liked this situation less and less. The man, the dog, the way this whole thing sat in my gut like spoiled food. I backed away facing the dog. It watched me, intently, like I was prey, like I was meat. A few moments later, our on-site emergency veterinarian, Dr. Harcum, came in, old school, no nonsense. He and Keaton exchanged few words. The vet recommended blood work and an overnight stay with an IV fluid drip. The dog needed warming up too. Keaton never lost that dumb smile, that half-cocked grin, like something was hilarious. But he nodded, accepted the treatment plan. We went to take the dog into the back treatment area. I slipped a muzzle on, of course, and that's when I noticed how the dog refused to walk. The owner had dragged it behind him earlier, but now it wasn't lethargic. I could see in its eyes it was choosing not to move. I had a larger male staff member, Ryan, carry the dog for me. As he picked it up, he glanced at me. We didn't exchange words, but I knew he felt it too. Not just the dog, the air. When we went to draw blood from its jugular, it didn't even react. Ryan held the dog steady, hands firm on either side of its head, jaws up. The needle slipped in, the syringe filled. The blood was cold. I ran it through the machines, just mild dehydration, some elevated lipase hinting at pancreatitis. No infection, nothing to explain why it was so cold. We placed it into a heated kennel, tucked it in with blankets, hooked up the IV catheter. I was relieved when Keaton left. That was 3 days ago. That night was quiet, rare for an emergency hospital. We had another dog kenneled 2 spaces down from the Rottweiler, a cattle dog that had undergone emergency laparotomy. It had been doing fine, normal vitals, good appetite, responsive. 2 hours later, I checked on it, and the cattle dog was dead. It had torn open its own incision. Somehow, it had gotten its cone off, and it had attacked itself. Not licking, not nibbling, mutilating. Even when coils of intestine unfurled from its abdomen, it had kept biting at those guts, like they were coiled snakes and he was killing them. The dog was slouched over, head limp against the floor. The blood ran in bright ribbons, swirling toward the kennel drain behind him, which slurped up the blood greedily. The kennel was a bloodbath. It streaked the walls, spattered the ceiling. His intestines had leaked bile and partially digested sludge. The cattle dog's eyes were vacant orbs, glistening in the light. I stood still for a moment, taking in the horror, the violence, and 2 kennels down, Mutt, sitting, watching, fluid drip running, heater humming, lips curled back, not panting, not whining, just smiling. His eyes reflected the fluorescent light, and for one sickening second, they looked almost human. Dr. Harcum made the call, but I heard every word, every choked sob through the thin walls of our office. The owner didn't just cry, they wailed. I'd seen plenty of death in this job, but this was different. This wasn't bad luck. Something else had its hands in this. The mood in the hospital shifted. In all my years, I'd never seen a dog unzip itself like a gym bag and spill out its intestines. Each time we walked past Mutt's kennel, his head turned slowly to follow. Each bloody towel, each mop bucket, every time we passed the cattle dog-sized body bag, zip-tied and labeled. Mutt watched. That night was quiet, but it didn't feel like a break. It felt like I was watching thunderheads forming in the distance. The promise of something worse to come. At some point, hours after the cattle dog's death, I heard the steady beeping of a monitor from the kennel ward. The IV pump hooked up to Mutt. I didn't want to go, but I did. I brought Ryan. We slipped the muzzle over Mutt's head easily. Too easily. He didn't resist, didn't flinch, just let it happen. His eyes followed the movement of our hands as we buckled it snugly behind his head. Only his eyes moved. Two dark orbs. Watching, digesting. The dog had kinked the IV line beneath its paw. We moved it aside, smoothed it out. That should have been it. A simple fix. But as we turned to leave, the light above his kennel flickered. At first, just a slight flicker. Barely noticeable. Then it sputtered, dimmed, and cut out completely. The kennel dropped into shadow. Ryan and I froze. The only light now was a faint glow from the hallway behind us. We exchanged a glance. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us wanted to acknowledge what we were feeling. The air in the room changed. Heavy, buzzing, like the static before a storm. Then the two tube lights above Mutt's kennel flared so bright it hurt to look at them. A pop, then a sizzle, and they died. Everything was silent. Ryan's back was to Mutt. Mutt lunged. A surge of violence. Muzzle strapped tight, body lunging forward. Mutt slammed his head against Ryan's side, ramming into him again and again. Ryan screamed. The dog was silent, except for the mechanical snapping of his jaws, working beneath the muzzle. Spittle flying. Ryan twisted, trying to stand. But the sudden attack had taken him off guard. I reacted without thinking. Threw open the kennel door. Mutt rammed into Ryan again, harder this time. The sheer force knocked him off balance. Ryan writhed around to grab at Mutt. The moment he faced Mutt, the dog stilled. It stood there silent, watching, bathed in the new darkness. Something was wrong with this dog. Not neurologically, something deeper. It felt intelligent. It felt calculating. It felt evil. Ryan was shaken, and so was I. But we didn't talk about it. We just got out of there. The rest of the night passed without incident. I focused on my other cases. A Chihuahua with pneumonia, a Persian cat having low-grade seizures, a tabby with proprioception deficits. I went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere. Ryan seemed dazed, like something fresh had broken inside of him. It wasn't just shock, or trauma, or fear. It was more profound than that. I left for the night still shaken. Ryan didn't even wave goodbye. I chain-smoked cigarettes in my car before driving home, flicked the butts out the window. My hands were shaking the entire ride, and when I finally collapsed into bed, I pulled my pistol out of my purse and slipped it under my pillow. And as the sun crept over the horizon, my dreams were wrong. I dreamed of a black face snarling in the dark, leaning in, sniffing. Eyes like hollow pits, endless, swirling voids, teeth sinking into my flesh, not a bite, not an attack, but a slow, deliberate pressure, easing into my skin. When I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat. When I came in for my shift that night, I felt a deep sense of disappointment the second I walked past Mutt's kennel. He was still there, heater purring, eyes following. The lights above his kennel were still blown out. The ones beside them had started to flicker. Ryan called out sick, said he'd been throwing up since the night before. I had a feeling there was more to the story, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. I shot him a text wishing him well. He read it, didn't reply. And that sinister, eerie man who called himself Keaton? His phone went straight to dial tone when we tried calling for a case update. He wasn't coming back. He'd paid half his bill up front in crisp old $100 bills. We weren't getting the other half. The night was busier. I told my manager we shouldn't put any other dogs in that ward, but we didn't have a choice. Our small animal ward was on the other side of the building, but for the larger dogs, they had to go there. We admitted a Great Dane with liver disease. There was nowhere else to put him, so I placed him in the kennel farthest from Mutt, 2 down from the cattle dog that had ripped itself apart. When I went back to check on them 10 minutes later, I stopped cold. Mutt's kennel was wide open. The latch was undone. The door swung open. He wasn't on fluids anymore. No pump to beep, no leash, no sign of how it had happened. Just him, sitting at the threshold, staring, slack-jawed. I shut the kennel, latched it securely, left the room, came back with 2 plates of food. Immediately, I felt nauseous. The kennel was open again. I hadn't heard a sound. Hadn't seen the door move. The only way to unlatch these kennels is with hands, with opposable thumbs. I slammed it shut again, this time locking it with a makeshift carabiner clip. I slid one plate of food under each kennel, low fat for the Dane, critical care for Mutt. I was walking away when I heard it, a sound that froze me. Not a growl, not a whine. It sounded like someone trying to speak through a mouthful of water, like a deep male voice gargling on words before spitting them out, a dog trying to talk. I turned. Mutt sat there, watching, silent now. Something tingled in the air. But the Dane had begun to cry. His plate of food lay spilled across the kennel floor. His hackles were raised, his body pressed against the back wall, eyes flicking toward the ceiling. He was feeling something deep and inexplicable. I felt it too. When I reached for the kennel bars, the crying stopped. The Dane's body trembled, then his whimpering changed, deepened, a low, eerie sound, like a tornado siren. Then it stopped altogether. The dog went still, too still. Then all at once he attacked his own leg, not chewing, not licking, ripping, breaking, deep, pulverizing bites. Bone cracked. Blood spattered the kennel floor. It wasn't a dog in pain. It wasn't a dog in distress. It was something else. Something destroying itself with purpose. I couldn't go in there. If I did, he'd likely redirect onto me, send me to the hospital. I turned and ran, shouting for help as I sprinted through the clinic. Dr. Harcum and two other techs, Angie and Denise, came rushing out of an exam room at the sound of my frantic screaming. I grabbed a rabies catch pole. The Dane was still going. The flesh of its leg hung in shreds, barely attached. Blood spurted like shots from a water gun, pulsing in rhythm with its heartbeats from a severed artery. I slipped open the kennel and looped the catch pole around its neck, tightening it hard, wrenching its head just enough to stop it from lunging. It snapped at the air, frantic but no emotion behind it. Then it latched onto the metal pole, not out of panic, not out of rage, out of a bizarre corruption of instinct. The sound was unbearable, teeth breaking against metal, splintering, shattering. The flesh of its leg was nearly gone. Just a ragged mess of meat and exposed bone that flapped as it chewed at the metal. I saw part of a fractured canine fall out of its mouth. The catchpole was bloody, dented, but holding firm. The dog was weakening by the time Dr. Harcum arrived, slumping over in the pile of its own blood. By the time we managed to inject a sedative, it was too late. The blood loss was too severe. The Dane fully collapsed to the floor, body twitching, biting. All at once, its eyes glazed over, and it went still. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mutt, lips pulled back in a snarl, smiling. "When is that fucking dog going to leave?" I snapped, pointing at him. Dr. Harcum shot me a sharp look. His white coat was streaked with blood. His eyes were dark, hollowed with exhaustion. "Something is wrong with it," I insisted. "With him." "All I see is a dog who just mutilated itself in our care," he said. "The second one in 2 days. Don't worry about that fucking dog. We have bigger issues here. I have another owner to call. Another person I have to tell their pet killed itself. Under my watch." He flicked blood from his fingers, dragged a sleeve across his face. He was years past burnout, a shell of his former self. He couldn't see what I saw. He couldn't see the way Mutt watched, the way his eyes lingered over the carnage pooling beneath my feet, like he was enjoying it. Dr. Harcum sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. "We tried calling that creepy bastard again. Numbers out of service. He ditched the dog on us. That meant we had to rehome it. It could take weeks. I couldn't take weeks with him. None of us could. And as I looked into Angie's eyes, I knew she felt the same. The hospital settled into an uneasy silence. The night shift pressed on, but something had shifted. We were all exhausted, hollowed out by what we'd seen. The cattle dog, the Great Dane, the blood. Mutt still sat in his kennel, untouched food at his feet, heater humming, watching. 2 more lights flickered out while I cleaned. I mopped blood from the floors, the thick iron scent clinging to my skin. The towels we used to soak up the mess were soaked through, a deep, ugly red. And through it all, Mutt never looked away. I told myself I'd figure something out, that I just needed time. But time wasn't on my side. I was dumping a load of bloody towels into the laundry bin when I heard it. Alun! I dropped everything. A voice, thick and wet, slurred in a way no dog's throat was built to produce. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a growl. It was trying to speak. And what came out wasn't just a sound. It was a name. My name, Allison. I turned, stomach lurching. Mutt was sitting in his kennel, still, muzzle slack, drool pooling on the blanket beneath him. His pupils swallowed the light. I couldn't move. My brain was trying to rationalize it, trying to shove what I had just heard into a box of normalcy. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was the pipes or a monitor or... But then the smell hit me. Rot. Not just the smell of the hospital, not just the faint antiseptic and animal musk that always clung to the air. This was meat left in the sink for weeks. This was something dead wedged into the cracks of the world. And I realized then, the smell I'd caught when Keaton first walked into the lobby, that greasy, putrid stench. It hadn't been him. It had been the dog. I ran. I grabbed the blankets off the floor, shoved them into the laundry bin, and bolted. My hands shook as I crammed the lid shut. My pulse was a hammer in my ears. Don't turn your back on it. The memory of Keaton's words crawled down my spine like a cold hand. He's acting possessed. I knew what Mutt had tried to do to Ryan. I knew what he wanted to do to me. And now I knew. I wasn't waiting for him to act. I was going to kill him. I kept my head down the rest of the shift, biding my time. My mind wasn't on the cases I took. I worked on autopilot. I went through the motions, but my body was moving without me. And when I got a moment alone, I pulled up 20 milliliters of pentobarbital sodium and phenytoin sodium solution. Euthasol, the sparkling pink liquid we use to put animals down. I took enough to kill a dog twice Mutt's size. There'd be a discrepancy in the controlled substance log, but I could smooth it out over the next few weeks. A couple of slightly higher doses on euthanasia cases, logged with enough time between them, and no one would notice. I locked the cabinet, slid the syringe into my pocket. I was committing a crime, breaking DEA laws. I could lose my license, my career, even end up in jail. But deep in my bones, I knew one thing. That thing in the kennel, it needed to die. The next morning, when I arrived for my shift, the hospital was heavy with grief. Everyone was crying. Ryan was dead. He'd taken his own life in his trailer sometime after leaving work. No details, no explanation. Just gone. The police had come by to inform us. They didn't stay long, didn't need to. I knew then. It cemented in my mind what had to be done. I don't know how, but I knew. I didn't wait. I worked through the grief, through the horror, pushing it all into a place I'd deal with later. I waited for the right moment, a lull between shift changes when staffing was light. I approached Mutt's kennel. His head was cocked, eyes tracking me. He looked almost expectant. I opened the kennel door and slid the muzzle over his face quickly. My hands moved with a sharpness I hadn't felt before. I yanked the straps too tight. My pulse was steady. I leaned out of the room, peered around the corner. No one coming. I held Mutt's paw, feeling for the vein, my other hand already slipping the needle beneath the skin. The syringe in my palm felt hot. I pushed the plunger. It was difficult, so much volume to inject. But I pushed it all, every last drop. Normally, when an animal is euthanized, it happens fast. They slump, their eyes stay open, their bodies give up. Mutt didn't move. I could have killed a human with this much euthasol, but he just sat there. I stared at him, heart pounding, my breath coming sharp. They usually pass away before the syringe is empty. Their bodies relax, their eyes go distant, the tension of life slipping from them like a sigh. Mutt's body stayed rigid, his breath steady. The drug should have shut him down immediately, but his muscles held. His head remained lifted, eyes locked onto mine. A chill crawled up my spine. This dog should be dead. Then the hallway lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs sizzled out, plunging the kennel ward into darkness. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of something unseen. The heater stopped. The only glow came from the exit sign at the far end of the hall, casting a weak green wash over the kennels. The shadows twisted around me. I couldn't move. The door to the kennel slammed shut behind me. My breath hitched. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the slow, wet rasp of Mutt's breathing. I could feel him in the dark, the weight of his presence sinking like teeth into my skin. Then, Alice. The voice came from the kennel, thick, gurgling, wrong. A sound like a dog learning to speak, like a throat filled with crunching gravel, trying to shape words. The vowels stretched, dripping with something slick and inhuman. My stomach lurched. I reached for the latch, fingers fumbling, but my hands were slick with sweat. My breathing was too loud. The darkness pressed in. The rot smell thickened, crawling up my throat. Then I felt it. A cold, dead hand closed around my ankle. I choked on a scream. My body jolted as something gripped me, nails pressing into my skin, curling against the fabric of my scrubs. The air turned electric, static snapping against my skin. I turned and ran. The door gave way beneath my shoulder, and I burst into the hallway, feet pounding against the tile. Behind me, I heard the kennel door smash open, the sound of paws heavy and fast hitting the ground. He was coming. I sprinted blindly through the dark, my shoulders slamming into the wall as I searched for the door handle. My fingers scraped smooth wood, no knob, no latch, just cold, endless surface. Paws pounded closer, no growling, no snarling, no warning, just movement, a freight train of silence barreling toward me. I spun, pressing my back against the door. The darkness was absolute, thick and suffocating. The emergency lights had died, swallowing the building in shadow. But I could hear him, breathing, slow, wet, thick with something I couldn't name. Then a whisper of movement, so close I felt the air shift. I bolted down the hall. No thought, no plan, just instinct. My body moved. I reached my locker, yanked it open, hands scrambling for my purse. The air behind me shifted. A weight, a presence. I felt it before I saw it. A void yawning open. My fingers closed around cold metal. The grip of my handgun. I turned, raised the barrel, and fired. The first shot lit up the hall like a camera flash. In that brief flicker, I saw him. That snarling grin. The second shot, the third. His body jerked, but he didn't fall. His lips were still curled back in that awful rictus. The sixth and final shot hit its mark. The left side of his skull caved inward, the muzzle of his face blown apart. His jaw sagged open, tongue limp. And even as he fell, his head twitched. A violent, unnatural snap of movement. A thick, wet pop echoed down the hall. He swayed. Then finally he dropped. I stood there, gun trembling in my hands, ears ringing. The darkness still pulsed around me, thick and heavy, pressing in from all sides. Then, footsteps, shouts, voices. Someone grabbed my arm, yanking me back. The lights flickered, buzzed, then flared back to life. And for the first time, I saw what I had done. One shot had buried itself in the tile. The rest had hit him. Mutt lay on his side, his head a ruin of blood and bone. His chest rose once, twice. Then he went still. The bite muzzle was missing. He must have pulled it off somewhere during the chase. I didn't move. The hospital swarmed with people. Cops were called. Questions were asked. I barely registered any of it. They took me into the back office, my hands still shaking, my ears still filled with phantom echoes. I knew what I had to say. I knew how to frame it. Self-defense. I played the part well. The police let me go. Mutt was wrapped, bagged, stuffed in our freezer, waiting for cremation. I took time off work, spent days in silence trying to erase the memory of that voice. It didn't work. The morning I was supposed to return for my shift, I got a phone call. Block number. I answered. Slow, shaky breathing filled the line. Then, a laugh. Low, drawling, thick with something I couldn't name. A mouthful of tobacco chew. Or blood. You shouldn't have killed it, little lady. Keaton. His voice slithered through the speaker, curling like a snake around my spine. His laughter built, rising, filling the silence. You've just gone and made things so much worse. And as the laughing turned into hollering, the line clicked dead. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. His words sank into my bones, gone, and made things so much worse. My first thought was confusion. How did he get my number? My second thought was frantic. Those words struck a chord deep inside my marrow. He said I'd made things worse. And for some reason, deep down in my soul, I believed him. My fiancé wanted me to be more than just his wife. Don't be nervous, they are going to love you, I promise. My fiancé David told me as he grabbed my hand to kiss it. I looked over to his side of the car as he lowered our interlocked fingers to rest on his leg. I couldn't believe the happiness I felt at that moment. As I watched him sing along to the music that played in the car, I counted my blessings. Up until last year when we met, I had given up on love. I thought no man would ever live up to my standards. Or maybe I was unlovable. Well, none of it ever mattered anymore because I found him. The light of the sun came through the sunroof and bounced off his face. The large pine trees that lined the dirt road cast a shadow over him every few seconds. I felt mesmerized by him. He got to know me so fast in such a short amount of time. The good, the ugly, all of it. It all felt so right. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. Funny how such deep feelings can change so fast. Nothing ever seemed off about David. Maybe I was blinded by the love bombing or by the desperation I had to be needed by someone. He was so agreeable, never wanted to argue, and told me he loved me early on. The only thing that felt wrong was that it felt too right. I don't have anyone close in my life I could get advice from. I have a single mother who hasn't cared about me since I moved out at 18. I don't think she cared about me when I lived under her roof, honestly. I have no siblings, I've never met my dad, and I don't have many friends. That's probably one of the reasons why he chose me. After hours in the car, we made it to his family home. Stepping out of the car, I was relieved to stretch. We walked up to the front door, and I nervously locked my arm around his. The door opened up just before we could knock. "Oh, hi, I'm so happy to meet you both. I'm Lacey," I timidly exclaimed. They both paused for what felt like a lifetime before a large smile grew on the woman's face. She leaned forward and gave me a hug that felt just slightly too long and too tight. As she pulled away, she grabbed my shoulders. "You are so beautiful," she told me. "Mom, come on," David said, embarrassed from behind me. "It's fine, David. I don't mind getting compliments," I responded with a grin, not knowing if I really was okay with it yet. "Don't mind her, Lacey. She doesn't know how to set boundaries with anyone," the tall man in the doorway said to me with a chuckle. "Hi, I'm Pate. We are so glad you came to meet us. We've heard so many wonderful things about you." As he finished his sentence, he nudged his wife, who seemed too distracted by me to hear what he said. "Oh, sorry, dear. I must have zoned out for a moment there. I'm Linda." "You both are totally fine. I feel like I know you both so well already. The introductions are hardly necessary." "That's so sweet of you to say. The feeling is mutual." "Well, come on in. Come on in," Linda said as she gestured for me and David to come inside. As we walked in together, I was welcomed with a strange feeling in my gut. The house felt too big but also claustrophobic. The family seemed happy to see me, but it also didn't feel completely genuine. Maybe they just had a fight, I thought to myself. David seemed a little antsy as well, but I figured it was just nerves from us all meeting for the first time. The rest of the night was uneventful. Dinner and card games. It was getting late, so I was given a quick tour of where my room was and anything else I might need in the night. David walked me to my room as his parents went to bed. "Thanks for understanding why we should have separate rooms. You know how Mom and Dad are," David said as he opened the squeaky wooden door. "Oh, it's no trouble at all, I get it. I wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable," I whispered as I tried to lean in for a kiss. Sorry, I don't want to kiss in front of them either. It might be weird," he said as he winched and dodged my kiss. "Sure, I guess that's okay," I replied with squinted, confused eyes. I didn't think it was weird to stay in different rooms. I know some people think that is unacceptable, but David's whole family took that sort of thing very seriously. We had shared a bed before in the past, but only for actual sleeping, if you get what I mean. David was clear from the beginning of our relationship he didn't want anything physical until marriage. Kissing was normally fine, but that was the limit for him. I didn't mind. I always found it romantic. We said our goodnights and I went to check out my bed. It all seemed fairly average, but I still hadn't shaken that feeling from when I walked in. It wasn't as bad as before, but I still felt uncomfortable. The air was stuffy and the bedding was stiff. Every small thing made it hard to get comfortable, and I found myself shifting a lot. The house was so squeaky I couldn't figure out if it was the family walking around or just the product of an old home settling. Before I knew it, I was woken up by a sunbeam coming through the window in the morning. I could hear the hustle and bustle of breakfast being made downstairs. I made my way down the steps and heard the family informing each other that I was awake in a whispered tone. As I turned the corner and looked into the kitchen, they all sat at the table smiling at me. A huge, extravagant breakfast lay across the table. More food than we would ever eat, like you see a housewife making a movie. "Oh, all for me. You didn't have to. I could have at least helped a little bit," I commented with a laugh and wide eyes, looking at a massive pile of waffles. I sat down and started to load up my plate. It wasn't until a minute in that I realized no one was talking or eating. I felt so rude for not saying more. I was just so excited for the meal, and am never a big talker in the morning. When I looked up at them, I was met with that terrible feeling again, but so much stronger. They all just smiled at me. So big it looked like their lips were starting to tremble. They sat with both hands in front of them folded. "You guys good? Please eat," I said, trying to hide my nerves, but failed miserably. "You know, we are just so happy to have you around, Lacey. You are just so perfect," Linda said to me through her smile. I nearly choked on my waffles. Saying I was beautiful was one thing, but perfect? After knowing me for less than 24 hours? "Lacey is right. Let's all eat together," David said. His parents nodded in agreement and started to fill up their plates. The rest of the meal felt awkward with little talking. After I was done eating, David insisted, the two of us went for a walk around the property alone. We walked a little ways from the house, and he apologized to me for all the weird behavior. I know Mom and Dad are acting weird, and hell, I'm probably a little off too, and I'm really sorry for that. My parents have been through a lot in the last couple of years, and rarely leave that old house. They really only see each other and me now, so I think they forget to act around other people. I guess I was playing along a bit to make them feel better, but honestly, I have forgotten how to act when around my parents and someone new. "We are all so happy to have you here. I knew it might be a little strange, but it's all with love, I promise." As he finished his sentence, he put his arm around me as we walked. I knew his explanation didn't make me feel completely better, but at least helped it make the smallest amount of sense. I was still weirded out, but felt more comfortable with staying there. As we walked around the 50-acre property, I noticed many things that helped them live almost completely off the grid. Solar panels and crops made me realize how self-sufficient they were, how they really didn't need to leave for many reasons. He showed me the small duck pond that had 2 little tire swings hanging from a tree. Then we neared the house again, and I saw 2 playhouses a few feet from each other. When I thought about it, I remembered seeing more things that came in twos on our walk. "David, why did you have 2 swings by the pond?" "Oh, you know, if Mom or Dad wanted to play on one with me," he replied while scratching his neck. "Really? How did they fit?" "They kind of look like small swings," I said with a chuckle. "Yeah, I don't know. I guess they just squeezed in." "Well, what about the playhouses? Why would you need 2? "Because I asked for 2 of them," he said while looking away from me. You got me there," I said with a laugh. I should have read as uncomfortably better at that moment. I was being dismissive of odd behavior because of his explanation at the start of our walk. I kept on just goofing around with him. We got back to the house, and David said he wanted to talk with his parents alone for a minute. His parents, who still had big fake smiles plastered on their faces, accepted his request. I went into my bedroom and shut the door. I put my ear to the door to try and eavesdrop. I normally wouldn't do something like that, but with how weird everything was, I couldn't resist. All I could hear was a panicked tone from all 3 of them. It was in whispers and frantic. Not like he was yelling at them, but worried. After around 10 minutes, David came to my room and let me know he talked to them. When I came back into the kitchen, everyone seemed more relaxed. It felt a little forced, but it was far less scary than the painted-on smiles. The rest of the day was laid back for the most part. We ate and played some more card games. Then it got dark out and things got really weird. We sat down to play Clue and Linda insisted I played Miss Scarlet. I chose Mr. Green as I have since I was a kid, but she kindly told me to switch characters. We all looked at each other. I looked at the rest of the family, trying to understand if she was serious or not. They all made a face at her to stop, but she pressed on. "Lacey, that's just how we do things around here. So please choose Miss Scarlet," Linda said through clenched teeth. "Why do I murmured as she stood to her feet to face me. Okay, I said as I grabbed the Miss Scarlet token. "Yay, I love it when you play Miss Scarlet. It makes me so happy," Linda said with glee. "When I play Miss Scarlet? What do you mean? This is the first time we have played Clue together," I said under my breath while David put his hand on my knee and shook his head at me. They played the rest of the game like nothing happened. That's when I started to question staying another night. I didn't feel safe anymore. Even if David was in my room, he seemed to turn into putty around his parents. I wanted to marry him. I was in love and wanted to make it work. How could such a short amount of time shift how I felt? After the game, Linda wanted to all sit around and look at some family photos. Pete seemed a little hesitant about it, but I know how convincing Linda can be. We all sat on the couches in front of the fireplace. Linda made us all hot chocolate and grabbed blankets. This exact scenario would be my dream typically. My whole body told me I should be relaxed. I was warm, I was with the love of my life, everyone was laughing and reminiscing, but I felt so cold, so scared. How would I explain to David that I wanted to leave? Yes, he should understand and put me first, but this was so important to him. I was so zoned out of the conversation, only thinking about how to get out of that damn house. The stories they told went in one ear and out the other, and then all at once, I snapped back to reality when I noticed something odd about some pictures. Most of them were of David as a boy, playing in the yard, at a birthday party, and around the house, with him in the center of the photo. Some photos, however, looked off. They weren't a standard size. They looked like they had been hand-cut with scissors. I could see slightly uneven edges. Also, the composition of the photos was slightly off. David would be far to the right or left with a random slice of the photo cut out. I was now paying extra close attention, asking lots of questions to try and get one of them to trip up about why someone or something was cut out of them. I knew if I outright asked, I could make Linda angry. Linda took out one particular photo and quickly put it in her pants pocket. Her eyes got wide as saucers and she looked at her husband. I think that's enough for tonight. It's late. Good night, everyone," she said as she stood to her feet and went to her room. I looked at Pete to see his reaction, and he met me with an eye roll. I was confused by this response but didn't know what I was looking for. I glanced at David and he shrugged his shoulders and gestured to our rooms. We walked to my room and I asked David to step in with me. He was a little hesitant, but I convinced him. "What the hell was that photo and why did it end the whole night?" I said angrily. Lacey, chill. It was probably a picture of my dad's ex-girlfriend. Sometimes pictures of her just end up in boxes because my dad is lazy and doesn't organize stacks of old photos before putting them in those big boxes. It's happened before. It's not a big deal. They are just dramatic about it. What? That doesn't make much sense. I promise it's okay. Haven't you noticed they are kind of weird? He said with a laugh. Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk to you about that. Talk about what? He shuffled nervously. I think we should leave tonight. I know this means a lot to you, but trust me, I need to get to know your parents better slowly. This is too much all at once. I hope they don't hate me for this, and I especially hope you don't hate me for this. But please listen, I confessed as I grabbed his hands. I'm not mad. I understand and was worried this would happen. They are a lot sometimes, and I should have expected this to be too much. What if I stay in your room tonight and we leave in the morning? It just would be easier to head out first thing. I didn't love that answer. In fact, I hated it. One more night sounded like hell. I knew it would be easier with him beside me, but my fight or flight was kicking in, and it was telling me to run as fast as I could. Unfortunately, like an idiot, I agreed. I told him I just needed some water and a quick snack, and I'd be back in bed. Heading back down the stairs, I wondered if I should just leave. Was David worth all this? As my mind was racing, I stopped in front of the cracked bedroom door of Linda and Pete. I knew if I could see the ex-girlfriend in that picture, it would give me the sliver of confidence I needed to stay the night. I knew deep down something else was in that photo. I could hear both of them snoring, and I could see the pants she was wearing just inside the door. There is no way she left the photo in the pants, I thought to myself, but I had to try. I pushed the door open with a squeak. Ugh, why did those doors have to be so squeaky? I grabbed the pants and heard rustling from the bed, but ignored it in the hopes they would settle. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I reached into the pants and I couldn't believe what I felt. She actually left it in her pocket. I pulled the photo out face down. I wanted to see the picture so badly, but now that it was in my hand, I was so scared to see it. As I sat on the cold tile floor, I heard the family start to walk up. David was coming down the stairs and I heard the dreaded squeak of the master bedroom door. I heard a whispered, panicked tone. "Where did she go?" Listening closely, I heard lights start to be turned on and walking around the house trying to calmly find me. I looked down at my hand and turned the photo around. I couldn't believe it. The photo was of me as a little girl, maybe 7 or 8. It wasn't a photo I gave to them. I had only shown David digital photos of me as a kid. Even worse, I didn't recognize the photo. Sure, you don't know every picture ever taken of you, but I had on a shirt I didn't recognize. And I saw a pond I didn't recognize. No, wait. My heart froze. It was the pond on their property I saw earlier in the day. Why was I here as a kid? Why am I here now? I reached for my phone to try and call the police. It was low odds I could get reception, but it was worth a try. After patting all my pockets, I realized I lost my phone. Of course, the one time I don't take my phone with me is when I need it most. "Bathroom? Bathroom?" I heard a whisper from the kitchen, then the haunting cracks from the hardwood floor moving towards me. I held my breath and sat perfectly still. They knew I was there. They were coming for me, but I tried to convince myself I had a chance still, that if I didn't move, I would disappear. In my silence, the brass doorknob jiggled. I heard Linda clear her throat. "Hey, Lacey, sweetie, are you feeling all right? Please, I want to go home. I don't know what's going on, but I want to leave." "This is too weird. I'm sorry, David. I tried. I really tried. Get me out of here," I yelled as I hit the bathroom wall in a rage. "Lacey, I don't think you understand. You can't leave," David somberly said with his mouth right by the door. "Like hell I can't. No, you belong here now. You are a part of the family." I could hear the sick smile David wore on his face from the other side of the old wooden door. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? A family? People to depend on?" "Yes, of course, I wanted a family, but not like this. Not this bad." "Lacey, open the door," Pete commanded. "Why on earth would I do that? If you don't let us in, we will come in." The sound of Pete's voice bounced in the air. A long pause as we all waited to see how the next couple of seconds would unfold. I backed up into the bathtub. It was the farthest away from the door I could possibly get. My back was flush against the wall in hopes I would disappear into it. The silence in the air was broken when I heard a long sigh and the sound of heavy, angry footsteps heading away from me, then followed by a loud door opening and closing. I was terrified at the thought of why he left. My mind tried to tell me he gave up, but my anxiety told me the worst was yet to come. Moments later, I heard the door open and close again. It was paired with the booming voice of Pete. "Lacey, I am coming in there to get you. I swear if you don't get back from that damn door..." "Dad, what are you doing?" David spoke up in my defense. "She will stand back. She's smart." Bang, bang, bang. A sledgehammer came smashing through the thin door. Just like a horror movie, Pete's large arm came through the new hole in the door and unlocked the door from the inside. The door came flying open, and I was met with David and his parents staring at me. Their expressions were hard to read. Sadness filled their eyes while they clenched their fists in anger. David chewed his lips nervously, while Linda took short, shallow breaths. Pete started to move towards me, his sledgehammer still ominously in his stone-cold grasp. As he got closer, he raised it above his head. I felt at that moment I was going to die. I now unfortunately understand what people mean when they say their life flashed before their eyes. I thought about how I'd never know my father, how I would never have a good relationship with my mother, the children I'd never have, the places I'd never go. I wondered what I did to deserve this. Why me? Why David? Why? My eyes closed as I prepared for my end. I could feel a tear well up as I heard David speak. Dad, what are you doing? All this for nothing? Stop! I opened my wet eyes to see David sprint towards me, tackling Pete into the wall. You can't do this. You are letting your anger take over again. You promised this wouldn't happen. Again? Are you serious? Pete replied as he pulled himself out from the now broken wall and pushed his son off him. You know damn well it wasn't my fault. Stop denying it, David said. She fell down those steps because you pushed her. You have to stop blaming me. It was your mom who killed her. She knew how drunk Abby was. She could barely walk straight. You tell me why your mom thought it would be a good idea to ask Abby to go downstairs and get her something that drunk? Then she had to hit her head on the way down. Stop it, Pete. We are supposed to be on the same team here. Stop pretending David didn't throw her down the steps after she was already dead to cover up the murder. I know she was already dead. I don't know how you killed her, but I know you did. I know it, Linda said as she put her head in her hands. Who is Abby? What did you people do? I said with a shaky whimper. Linda lifted her head out of her hands and left my sight. The two men stood up and walked to block the door. Linda soon reappeared around the corner with a cloth in her hand. David and his mother walked back towards me. I tried to fight back as David got close to me. I wanted to fight with all my strength. I knew I needed to bite, scratch, and do anything I could, but I just couldn't. I still didn't see David the same as I did even an hour ago, but I couldn't hurt him. He got my arms behind my back as Linda walked to me with the rag in her hand. I was greeted with the sweet smell of chloroform. I tried to fight the fading feeling as I locked eyes with David. It's okay, he whispered softly as I fell into darkness. The next thing I knew, I was waking up. I blinked over and over again, trying to get my eyes to focus. I felt dizzy and out of it. I hoped and prayed that as my eyes started to work, I would see my room at home. I hoped I'd see my Pulp Fiction poster on the wall or my knitted green blanket. I rubbed my eyes and was heartbroken to not see my comfy room. Not just that, but I'd never seen this room before. It had pink walls with big flowers all over them, now covered with vinyl records and band posters. A room that was once for a little girl, but had the fingerprints of a girl trying so desperately to grow up. As my eyes scanned the room, I saw a name on the wall. Abby. My heart fell to my knees. I sat in bed trying to gather my thoughts and everything that was happening. Nervously, I picked at my shirt only to find I was in PJs I didn't recognize. I got overwhelmed at the thought of someone taking off my old clothes and putting me in these new pajamas. The faint sound of music started to fill my ears. I slowly walked to the door and pressed my ear against it. Dancing music, laughing, talking. What was going on? I looked around the room to try and plot a way out. The window was shut and I couldn't get it to open. I thought I could maybe slam something into the window to break it. But if I failed, I thought the consequences could be far worse. I cracked the door open and quietly as I could, I tiptoed to my original room in the house and looked for my phone with no luck. In fact, none of my stuff was in there. Hope felt so lost, I was terrified. After weighing my options for a few minutes, the only idea I had was to just sprint out the front door and keep running up the road. The house was in the middle of nowhere, miles and miles beyond their property before anyone or anything, but I had to try. I took 3 big deep breaths and ran for it, down the hallway and stairwell, around the corner and to the door, telling myself the whole time to not look at them, pretend they don't exist. When I ran into the door, I tried to turn the knob but found a large lock on the door. Glancing up at the family, I was met with worried faces. "What's wrong, Abby? Don't you want some breakfast?" Linda said with a plate in her hand. "Abby? Abby? Why did you call me that?" I panicked. "Oh, come on, Abby. Don't start with us. Come have some breakfast," Pete said with a friendly chuckle. I looked around at all the doors and windows and saw large locks on all of them. I was trapped. As fast as I could, I grabbed a nearby rolling pin and threw it at the glass door. All it did was humorously bounce off like some kind of cartoon. The look of worry only grew on the deranged family's faces. I took one step towards them with the rolling pin in my hand. They could see the rage in my eyes. In a split second, David jumped up and ran to me, tying my hands behind my back with a twist tie before I had any time to react. He sat me down at the table to eat with them, ensuring I was tied to the chair as well as my wrist being bound. They went on talking and acting like everything was normal. After they were done eating, Linda brought out a scrapbook and set it down on the table. She began to flip through the pages and explain them to me. It was the pictures I saw from the night before, except the full pictures. The spots that were cut out from corners before now had me in them. Can someone please just tell me what is going on? Who is Abby, and why am I in all these pictures? I begged. The family all exchanged looks, and David spoke. Listen, Abby, I know you were gone for a couple of years. I know you went through a lot while you were missing, and it's a lot to adjust to, but we are here for you. I'm just so happy to have my sister back. Excuse me? You're what? You've got to be kidding me, I yelled. You are a sick freak. What is happening? I struggled to get out of the chair with no success. I just fell to the ground while I kicked and screamed. Eventually, they left the room and started on other duties around the home. I got tired of the struggle and laid still on the slick kitchen floor with my cheek pressed against the ground. Sitting in my own sorrow, I thought I would come up with a plan, but nothing. Soon, David came to me. He lifted my chair up and sat in front of me. This is what you wanted, David whispered. What are you on? How on earth is this what I wanted? I whispered back. A family. You wanted a family. You never had a real one. I knew you craved it. We lost someone in the family and you needed to find a new one. It only makes sense. Yes, of course I wanted a family. I wanted to make a family. I wanted to have kids with you, David. I wanted to marry you and start over with you. I didn't want you to be my brother. How does this make any sense to you? Please let me go. This isn't what I want. I begged. You can't deny this. You saw the picture. You are the spitting image of Abby. You might as well be here. It's like she never fell down those steps. You are sick. You killed her, didn't you? I said as he leaned back in his chair with a smirk. I didn't kill anyone. You are right here, Abby. We missed you so badly while you were gone. He stood up and walked out of the kitchen. After sitting in the chair all day, they came to untie me. I made up my mind after sitting in the chair for so long that I would just go along with everything until I found an escape plan. They slowly freed me, but stayed close by, waiting for me to run or try and hurt them, but instead I sat and smiled at them. It's so nice to be home again, I said, hoping they would fall for my insincerity as they all made eye contact. We are so happy to have you home, David said with relief. The family all shuffled off to their own bedrooms and shut the doors. I figured I would do the same. I rubbed my tired eyes as I walked when I made it to the staircase. I was still where I stood, studying the pattern on the carpet, trying to see if any bloodstains from Abby still remained. I looked at the top of the steps, imagining what actually happened to that poor girl. What was the truth? Are they delusional, thinking they can actually replace her? Or do they feel so guilty they feel like they had to? With every creak of the wood as I walked up the steps, I swore I could hear her final screams. I made it back to my room, Abby's room, and found a phone on the nightstand. It had no password, so I was able to get in. It's probably no surprise, but it was Abby's. My phone is nowhere to be found. I am stuck with hers. I tried calling 911, but the line just rings and rings. I have no numbers memorized to call and help me. I was an idiot and didn't tell anyone where I was going. My coworkers will notice I am gone, but not care enough to look and have no clue where to tell the police to look. I'm hundreds of miles away from my job. No family members care enough to come looking for me or even notice that I'm gone. The only people who care about me are these psychopaths trying to gaslight me. The thing that hurts me the most is this was supposed to be my chosen family. I was supposed to get married. That's all I wanted, and they could have had it too. But it wasn't enough for them. They couldn't have a new daughter-in-law, but they had to have a daughter. The daughter they lost. The daughter they killed. I'm posting this here with Abby's phone because I don't know who else I can ask. I'm crossing my fingers that this somehow gets posted despite some technical issues I've had. The plan is to lay low for a while, maybe try and run once I earn some trust. I would be running for a long time before finding help. This isn't what I had in mind when David asked me to spend the rest of my life with him.